This is BBN, Bible Believers Network, Network Express Home Bible Study. Hi, I'm Derek L. Jennings, Sr., your host. Today we have a guest with us, Dennis Bland. I've been knowing Dennis for quite a while. I've been impressed with him, his integrity, the way he carries himself. We go to the same church, but on about a week ago, we had a men's breakfast, and I heard Dennis speak on some things, and I was so impressed with what I heard. I said, this needs to be on our podcast. So we've invited Dennis today, and if you could, Dennis, if you would just give us a little background on yourself, and if you would start from where you started at the particular men's breakfast, and pretty much I'll just be quiet and let you talk, and I might just jump in and interject this or that. Go ahead.
Thank you, Derek. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. My name is Dennis Bland, and I grew up in Indianapolis. I attended Indianapolis public schools, and I've been involved in youth development for over 25 years, and I had the opportunity to attend the Brotherhood breakfast offered at Christ Temple Apostolic Church. And the pastor there, Pastor Charles Furnell, asked if I'd have a few words to address the males there and the young people there. And so I did nothing more than share what I've been talking about for years based upon my experiences in working with young people and working with black youth. And the essence of my comment there at the breakfast was and is that young people need our help. And I talked about how so much of our young people's problems and challenges are really not so much a function of the problems of our young people, but more so a function of a society that has put so much negative on our young people, and our young people are simply in a situation where they are forced to react to the environment that's been created for them. Young people don't pass laws, adults do. And so adults really create environments, and oftentimes environments are created that are negative, and young people are forced to deal with the negative environment in which they are exposed. And so you have a situation today where there's a prevalence of illegal drugs, there's a prevalence of weapons, there's a prevalence of illicit sex, there's a prevalence of so many things that are really detrimental to young people, and young people are forced to deal with that environment to which they have been exposed. One of my hopes is that we can gather people together who really understand really the challenges that our young people are facing, and who would then rally around young people to help them reach and achieve and maximize their God-given potential. As I was sharing at the breakfast a week or so ago, I think so much of helping young people understand how they can maximize their God-given ability is really helping them understand and helping adults understand the game, if I can use that word, the game or the hustle that's being played on the minds of young people. Oftentimes you hear the expression used as like taking candy from a baby. There's a reason why you have pedophiles. Pedophiles, by definition, abuse children. And the reason they abuse children is because they realize that in a sense it's like taking candy from a baby. They abuse children because children don't know how to think for themselves. They don't know how people are manipulating them. They don't know how people are taking advantage of them because, well, they're children. Their minds are not developed. Their minds are not mature. And so I was sharing with the group that it is so important to be able to understand the game or the hustle that's being played on the minds of young people. I'd like to say those who have the access have the influence, and those who have the influence have the control. And so one of the most pernicious ways used by Satan and imps from hell, one of the most pernicious acts used by people who would take advantage of children, is the act of access. How can I get access or exposure to the hearts and the minds of young people? If I can get access to them, then I can begin to manipulate them. If I can begin to manipulate them, then perhaps I can begin to influence them And if that influence isn't strong enough, then I can begin to control them. And if I can begin to control young people, then at some point I can begin to really dictate their thoughts and dictate their behaviors and dictate their attitudes. All of a sudden, young people are not really thinking for themselves. They are really thinking based upon the influence that someone else is exerting on them. And so you have a situation today where young people are doing things not necessarily because that's what they want to do. They are oftentimes doing things negatively because they have been programmed to do them. And they've been programmed to do them because you have people who with ill intent, ill motives, who have gotten access to the young people's brains and access to the young people's heart. The word access simply means to make easy. And unfortunately, oftentimes in society, we have pretty much given the hearts and minds, the precious God-given hearts and minds of our young people, we have given those hearts and minds away. One of the ways we have done that historically is through media. Access is gained of our young people through TV. And of course, as you look at the different television programs that are on today, young people are looking at program that is full of pornographic content. The violence, the sexuality, the over-sexualization of society and of young people, that is something that young people are exposed to today. And consequently, it's not surprising to us that we have now a generation that is highly sexually active, a generation that has STDs, a generation that has HIV, a generation that has full-blown AIDS. You have a generation that is so steeply and deeply embedded in so much of what they have seen on TV, or so much that they have been exposed to through the medium of TV, and now young people are simply acting out those behaviors which they have been taught. Another medium, of course, is the cell phone and the iPod. With the prevalence of cell phones now, there are so many young people who have access to that media, and with that access, we have to realize that there are so many people who are looking forward to and have looked forward to young people getting access to that media, because these people who would prey on young people, they realize that the moment you gave young people access to this additional media, then some of these predators are saying, now you have essentially given now me access to the children by giving them access to the media. And so you can have a situation today where through phones or through technology, through the computer, you can have a child sitting in this room, or a child sitting in her bedroom in her home, and yet someone through the media, through various forms of media, have gotten access to the young people, where now all of a sudden you have these individuals who are literally sucking the lives and sucking the spirits out of the young people, even as the young people sitting in that room. Why? Because that access has happened. And so as adults who care about children, we just have to have a godly consciousness about what is going on, what is taking place. We have to be aware. We have to ask God to just elevate our minds and elevate our thought processes so that we are more perceptive, and we are more cognizant, we're more mindful of the different games and the different stratagem that Satan will play that will allow these twisted-minded people to get access to our young people. We have a situation today where our young people are dying. When you look at these statistics, anything from a 1 in 21 homicide rate, depending upon the statistics, to 38-39% of all alcohol consumption being consumed by blacks, to 38-39% of all cigarettes consumed by blacks, even though blacks only make up 13% of the United States population. It says to me that we are a community overall, unfortunately, a community that's drunk and a community that's high. And so it's not surprising then when you see so many of the actions and behaviors when people, you read the paper, you look at the news, you listen to the news, and people are saying, what's going on? Well, look at the influencers. Oftentimes you will find, not surprising, that someone shot their friend or someone shot someone else. You will find oftentimes that one or both of them are drunk, one or both of them are high. Now obviously you have situations where neither is drunk or neither is high, but again the reality is in a number of these situations you have someone who is actually whose decisions are really being governed or influenced by alcohol or drugs. And again, when you have 13% of the U.S. population consuming about 38% of all the alcohol, it just says to us that we need to be mindful, because there are so many people in our society who actually live life on a high, or who live life intoxicated. Now, of course, we know that intoxication, tox by its very definition, means poison. So we have people who actually are walking around with poison systems, and those poison systems are causing them to do poisonous things. And so not only does it affect society, but it obviously has a direct effect on our children. I recall Tupac saying several years ago, he says in one of his songs, and people wonder why we crazy. Well, an intoxicated state, a drunken state, a drug-induced state will cause you to do crazy things. It will cause you to literally act outside of your mind, outside of a rational mind. And so we just have to do everything we can to really protect our children. We have to be mindful, and we have to do everything we can to make sure that our young people are taught properly. We have to make sure that our young people are schooled. We have to make sure that our young people's hearts and brains and minds are protected from evil people who would cause them harm.
Amen, amen. I have a few questions concerning some of the things that you had said right now, as well as earlier last week. I was really impressed with your statement about fathers. You know, you had touched on the lack of fatherhood in an African-American community. Now, we're in Indianapolis, Indiana. Now, we know it's not just indicative of Indianapolis, Indiana, but sometimes we have to deal with what God has given us, and we're sought for this area, so we have to deal with where we're at. And so you had made a statement about how you couldn't imagine what it was like to be without a father. So can you elaborate on that a little bit?
One of the greatest tragedies that has befallen our young people is the tragedy of the absence of a positive male role model and a positive male presence. So much of, in nature, so much of our learning and so much of our teaching comes through the modeling of a male or female species. Females learn to be females by watching and learning from females. Likewise, males learn how to be males by watching and emulating and modeling the lives of males. And unfortunately, according to some reliable data, we have a situation where so many black males in African American society are literally absent from the lives of children. And not just from the children that they have sired, but they're absent from other children that they could positively influence. According to recent data, you have as many as 71% of black children who are living in homes without their father. Now compare that to, say, an Asian population where you would have only 16% of their children living without their father. And I would say that's 16% too high. You want a father in every home, a father and a mother. And yet by comparison, you see 16% versus 71% for black children. The average is about 39% overall, 51% of Hispanic children live without their father in the home. And again, for African Americans, that number is about 71%. So oftentimes the thought is, what does that mean for the male? Well, it means that you don't have that model. It also means that you leave children vulnerable to anyone who would take advantage whenever there is not a black male adult present. Also, the thought oftentimes goes to the absence of the role model for the male child. What is oftentimes equally paralyzing and debilitating is the negative consequence on the female of not having a male role model or a male presence. One of the primary roles of male in society and in nature is protector and defender. And yet when there's an absence of a male in 71% of the homes, it typically means that predators and people who would prey on young females, those predators are gaining greater access because there is not the presence of a male who would serve as a defender or serve as a protector, or simply has a presence that causes a potential criminal or predator. That presence oftentimes causes that potential assailant to say, no, I won't go and approach that, I won't go and try that because I see that there is a presence. I see that there's a male presence. I see that there's someone there who may offer me resistance.
Who may hurt me.
Who may, absolutely right.
Right.
And so when you have the absence of the male, again, it's detrimental not only to youth males, but it's detrimental to youth females. And so you begin to see some of the ramifications in society that are felt by males and female children because there is not a black male present.
Okay, and you had also talked about the dysfunctionality that is operating. You had already mentioned some of the symptoms, but you had also talked about the dysfunctional thing, about how sometimes male are attracted to males and females attracted to females. You even touched on the HIV statistics. If you could help us with that.
Yet another underlying challenge for young people, and all of this is interconnected, one of the things that happens when young people do not have strong parenting, and one of the things that happens when we allow unbridled access to the hearts and minds of young people, and one thing that happens when we begin to allow the wrong influences to teach or school our children, and make no mistake about it, some of the worst and some of the most evil people are educators. Now that may be strange to hear, and yet education in and of itself is neutral. The issue becomes who is going to educate. Will you educate positively or will they educate negatively? But there are educators all over the society. And so what we're interested in is who is doing the educating. Another problem that's affecting our young people is that you have so many people who have access to the hearts and minds of young people, and because of that access, you have young people who are simply confused. I am uneducated, or I am miseducated, or I am receiving mixed messages, and these mixed messages are causing me confusion. That word confusion simply lets us know that you're talking about a mixture. Whenever you hear the word confusion in its original definition, you're really talking about a mixture. And oftentimes it's a strange mix. For example, one person tells you to go east when you're looking for directions. If you want to find that house, you go 3 blocks east. You go and talk to another person, and a person says, well, to find this place, you go 3 blocks west. You have a mixture of messages, and those messages, that mixture, is actually causing someone to sit back and say, now wait a minute, which way am I going? That's confusion. The mixture has come. Well, young people are oftentimes strung out and mixed up today because we are oftentimes teaching them one thing and then we're showing them something else. There's another example of a young person consequently being confused because of the mixture of messages or the mixture of teaching. Someone says it's okay, or someone says you should not have sex until marriage, and yet the young person is sitting up at home and everything that's coming across the TV says that marriage and sex is irrelevant. You don't have to be married to have sex. Someone says you should not have sex before marriage, and yet a young person knows that he or she is watching mother or father engage in sex outside of the marriage. And so again, the young people are saying in their minds, I'm confused. You're teaching me one thing with your word, you're teaching me something different with your actions. I'm confused. And likewise, when you see young people where parents are saying, we encourage you to get an education, and yet young people see that there's an environment that doesn't encourage education, once again, all we're doing is confusing the young people. If young people say, well, I thought relationship was between a man and a woman, and yet I see you relationships, or you're encouraging relationships between two men and two women, young people are naturally confused. I'm being taught different things. I'm being sent different messages. And this mixture of messages is really causing me consternation about what I really ought to be doing. Which direction should I really go?
Yeah, it's really sad. You know, I was working today, and I met a young lady, and she was in a wheelchair. She needed some help. She could walk and everything, but she just seemed to be a little weak. And she said she was 19 years old, and she said that she just had a baby about a month ago, and she, you know, I don't like the baby's daddy because, you know, this, for whatever reason, she began to, you know, just kind of talk like in her age group and youth, and, you know, not married, but got pregnant. Now she's saying I might be pregnant again, and, you know, and I'm probably just going to go get an abortion on this one because we're not together, and I hate the baby's daddy. And I'm just sitting here, you know, as I was just hearing her and just pushing her along, saying, oh my God, she fits right into the category of what you're talking about, and something that's too high in our African American community. It's not just about African American, but we're just focusing on that for now. We'll touch on other stuff later on another podcast. But just to know that in America, there's 1,400 abortions per day in the African American community. We make up 13 or now less than 13% of the population. And in one particular high school, I had heard that there was 90% of the senior class HIV positive. I mean, we're just destroying ourselves. And so when I heard you speak, I said, yes, you know, when you go to meetings, you know, I'm not a big meeting person, and that's nothing against those that are. But I believe in doing, you know, I like talking on the phone, network. Okay, let's go do it. Let's cut the tree down. Let's just go do it, you know. And I like to have solutions. And so when we, I guess, met from a spiritual perspective in church, I always would wonder, why does Dennis like what I'm doing so much? Because I like winning souls to Christ. I like to see people born again and show them repentance. But I didn't realize we're working in the same field in different corners of that same field. And so I like to see solutions to the problems of people, and I see the spiritual solution as a piece of it, you know, a big, tremendous piece of it. You know, it's not just about pie in the sky after we die. Heaven, we all want to go there. But if you spiritually can get right, morally can get right, and have a biblical perspective that can help you say to some of these influences and some of these outside influences, no, this is better because the Bible shows a better way, you know, then I think that helps to curb a lot of the things that you're talking about. But you also are president of an organization, I believe, that is helping, doing something to help. So what are y'all as an organization doing to actually not only talk about the problem, but are positioned, I believe the churches and organizations, nonprofit organizations, should do more than have buffets. You know, we need to do something that actually deals with some of the things we talk about in our meetings?
Well, one of the first things that we are focused on doing at the Center for Leadership Development is to actually get access to these young people. I've been talking about access. Here's an opportunity to actually access young people with a plan and a strategy for building them up. And so as you talk about how you help address the needs of young people, I believe that first and foremost is a plan to actually teach young people the value of their own God-given life. When you get access to young people, for me, step number one is helping them understand the sanctity of their own lives. You have to understand that life has value. In fact, your life has imminent value. Your life is priceless. Your life is a gift from God. How do you treasure? How do you honor? How do you protect that gift? And so oftentimes, so much of society is set up around focusing on the external. Let me do something different to my hair. Let me do something different to my nails. Let me do something different even outside of my body altogether. 22 inches or 24-inch rims or 26-inch rims are somehow going to give me status or esteem. Unfortunately, it just doesn't happen. Unfortunately, too many people believe that it does. Life really begins in the core. Life begins in the soul. And in the soul of a person, they have to understand, they have to come to a knowledge or a consciousness that their life is a treasure given by God Himself. A gift bowed by God Himself. A gift created and wrapped and presented by God Himself. And if we don't start there, then we begin to even have some forms of external success, and yet our hearts are still empty. And so number one, you have to begin to help young people understand this thing called esteem. And we talk about self-esteem. That's simply a different word for value. Self-esteem or self-value. My life is invaluable. And then next, what we begin to help young people understand beyond the value of their lives is you begin to ask yourself, just as the animal kingdom does at different forms of life, or different levels of life, there is a basic element of protection and survival. How do you protect your life? How do you sustain your life? Well, with the human family, with the human animal, one of the greatest ways proven for protecting that sacred life is to educate it. We've been talking about so much of what has happened to young people because people get access to the hearts and minds of young people. One of the greatest antidotes to being taken advantage of is being educated. And yet we have a situation in our society where too many people have learned or have been taught that education is irrelevant, that education is meaningless.
I want to interject too, because, I want to interject a spiritual concept to that lends itself to the natural. My people perish for the lack of knowledge, understanding, wisdom, education. Whether it be in a natural realm or whether it be in a spiritual realm, there's a perishing for ignorance sake.
And I would agree with that. As you asked what we're doing over at CLD, it really is our focus is on taking care of the hearts and the minds of young people, and taking care of the hearts and the minds by developing self-worth and developing their minds, growing educationally, because education really is transformative, and education is of God. And yet so many times we begin to see an education as irrelevant, and yet different times in our lives we come to figure out, oh man, I see just how important an education is. It's so interesting to me how people can say an education is so relevant and yet are so irrelevant, and yet the moment they get sick or the moment something bad happens to their heart, they're running quickly to the educated. For example, whenever you're saying, I'm going to see my doctor, what you're really saying is, I'm going to the educated. I have a need, and the uneducated cannot help me. I have a need, I have a problem with my heart, I need a cardiologist. I've broken a bone and I've broken it severely. I need an orthopedic surgeon to repair my damaged bone. What we're saying is I need the educated. And even in your comment about education and spirituality, once again, the greatest ignorance we have is an ignorance outside of God. I don't know the Christ. And so in Hosea chapter 4, which you mentioned, that whole chapter really begins, first of all, with God letting the people know that he had a beef against them. He said, I have a beef. I got a problem with you. I got a controversy. And the controversy was, as you stated, that there is no knowledge of God in the land. And then he goes on to say in verse 6, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. And he says, because you have rejected knowledge of God, knowledge of his ways, then I will also reject you. And because you have forsaken me, then I will also forsake your children. So yes, at every level, knowledge is critical, and yet, unfortunately, we live in a society that perpetuates ignorance. We live in a society where, because of this perpetuated ignorance, we now have, as a result, a group of young people who now spend their time growing in any and everything that is really irrelevant.
Yes, and that same scripture, well, some people can say, well, that's because y'all are church people or something like that, and it's like, no, the Proverbs deal with everyday practical living, interacting with people. And so when you lack those particular understandings of how to interact with those in authority and those that are around you, then people lose their lives that way, just by lacking some basic understanding of how to sometimes just be quiet or not to get too emotional, and too angry, and learning how to calm yourself and how to entreat people and how to speak and be mannerly and thankful and all that. So how would someone, is probably for those that live in Indiana, per se, to get involved with your program, how would someone start the process of getting involved with Center for Leadership Development?
Well, it's really simple. Anyone who's interested could contact our organization at 923-8111.
Is that 317?
317.
Okay.
317-923-8111. And we take young people from grades beginning in grade 4 and going up to grade 12. And it's a matter of the young person being in school and knowing how to behave. If you're in school and you know how to behave, we're welcome. Now, I will say that for all the programs that we offer to really help young people maximize their God-given potential, we think at its core we're able to have success because we are really emphasizing the training and the development in values. We emphasize 5 values at CLD, and those values are character, education, leadership, service, and career. So character is the inner man. What you have in your heart and in your head comes out in your hands. And then we emphasize education. That's one of our pillars of success. We emphasize leadership. And I happen to believe that the greatest leader there ever was and ever is the leadership of Christ. We emphasize service. That simply means giving back. And again, Christ is the quintessential example of the servant who gives back to community. And we emphasize career. And so many young people, as we know, they are so brilliant. They are so blessed by God. They are so talented. And yet they have little direction in terms of a career because they have not been properly taught and properly mentored. So much God-given ability, so much potential, and yet they lack in a career, and a meaningful career. They're doing a lot of jobs and a lot of hustle, but lack in career because there has not been the necessary focus, the necessary training, the necessary discipline, and the necessary education.
Yeah, and children, as well as their parents, sometimes need direction in those areas, because when you're used to settling for less you just sometimes can say, well, this is all that I probably can get. I just need to take anything I can get without any foresight. And then those years just roll on as you're an adult, so it's good. But I did key in on the word service. What ways do you emphasize for the young people that you train to embark in community service?
We actually have them and ask that they go out and do several projects that are approved by their parents. But we ask them to do everything from, as long as it's not dangerous. But the young people, they will go and help out at various community centers. They will help out in their neighborhood. They will help out in putting on different functions for different groups or different churches. We have young men who will go out and actually clean up yards for their neighbors, clean up yards for the elderly. They'll go and volunteer at, for example, the Moselle Sanders annual Thanksgiving dinner. We have a number of young people who participate in that. And we don't call it just service. One of our projects we have, it's called a leadership service project. And that name is by design. We're helping young people understand that service and serving really is about leadership. And growing in knowledge is really growing your ability and your capacity to offer even greater service. And so much about what we're doing is really service, but we're also helping young people to understand that it really is through service that young people really begin to even grow in the knowledge of their own potential and their own self-worth and their own ability to impact society as a result of the service that they give. And so they're beginning to understand that when I provide a service, it's not just a benefit to the people I'm helping, but I'm coming to learn in my maturation process and in my development. I'm coming to understand that the more service I give, the more my own self-worth and my self-concept is starting to increase.
Well, see, the same thing happens from a spiritual perspective, because some people may wonder why. Well, Derek, why do you like to win souls so much? Because it's like when I do that, it's like it's building me up, it's helping me, and God is blessing me at the same time. That Luke 6:38 is not about shaking someone's wallet out of their pocket, but when I give in a spiritual sense, it just awakens, what God has given us, as well as, those that love Christ and are born again. So it works on both planes. And so I think we're so similar, because we're service minded, we're people minded, we want to see people get better, we want to see people come up. So as we close, is there anything else you would like to say before you close? And for any last words of encouragement for those that feel like, well, yeah, that program may work for someone that's already doing all right, but for someone like me that my parents are cracked out and, I don't have anything going for me, how is this going to work for me,
Well, I would say that we would want those young people to be involved too. We serve young people, and young people come with challenges. And in fact, we are here to help challenges with those who are dealing with challenges, and who we're able to serve, we will serve. If there is a need or a challenge that we can't meet, then we'll try to put them in contact with someone who can. But we understand that young people are dealing with so many problems in life, so many difficult environments, so many difficult situations. And I would just emphasize that this is why we start with the value character first. Because character really says that this is the part of me that I am developing, which enables me to overcome and deal with different situations in life, even situations that are some of the ugliest and some of the worst situations you can imagine. The character of a person allows them the power and the strength and the resiliency and the tenacity to keep on pushing and to keep fighting and to surround themselves with the right types of mentors so that they can overcome these tough, difficult situations. And while our heart goes out to people who are dealing with these tough, difficult situations, we also help them by helping them understand that they aren't the first person who dealt with something as severe as what they're dealing with. And yet there are other people who have been able to overcome these situations, these adverse situations in life, and succeed. And we help young people understand that just as these individuals have been able to succeed despite the obstacles and challenges, these young people can succeed as well. And oftentimes young people just need to be encouraged in that, as well as getting the practical help and assistance they need.
Yeah, that's good, because oftentimes people say, you know, you don't understand what I'm going through. You don't understand. You can't, because they see you in a successful way. You might have a suit on and you may be in an office, but they don't know your past or your history, but all they do is see you now. But when you can introduce them to people that have walked in their shoes and have overcome those obstacles, then that's a good thing. And sometimes that's what people need to see, that, wow, I can make it then, because if they can do it, then I can do it. And so, Dennis, we would like to thank you for coming, the president of Center for Leadership Development, for taking time out of your busy schedule. This is BBN, Bible Believers Network, Network Express Home Bible Study. This is Derek. If you'd like to contact us, you can reach us at 317-892-9311. That's 317-892-9311. You can go on the web and listen to this podcast at www.biblegate.blogspot.com. That's www.biblegate.blogspot.com. May God bless you.